Hey everyone, it's Crash Knife Fight, and I want to talk about the potential for a Star Wars Battlefront 3 and why I believe EA and DICE should make it. I recently made a video about the future of Battlefront 2, but I think we all need to consider the likelihood that we are reaching the end of new content for that game in the near future. Personally, I would really like to see BF2 continue to grow for the rest of this year, and EA and DICE have surprised me with their ongoing work on new content. Seriously, if you had told me this time last year that we could expect new game modes, heroes, skins, and special units well past the first year, I would assume you were insane. Regardless of this game's lifespan, the developers and publisher have no doubt pondered the future of this franchise for some time. So let me talk about a few reasons that EA and DICE should make Battlefront 3 and what I would expect to be included in the game. For starters, there is a ton of untapped source material that a third title could explore. The Star Wars universe is vast, and players have requested a variety of content from all eras that would work well in this type of shooter. Think about all of the worlds and locations that EA and DICE have yet to touch. Places like Coruscant, Felucia, Jeddah, and Mustafar, just to name a few. Imagine the potential for a map inside Vader's fortress on Mustafar, or any one of the many iconic locations on Coruscant. Moreover, there are a multitude of maps and locations from BF1 that fans have requested appear in BF2, and a new game would allow DICE to rework player favorites like Scarif and the larger map modes from Bespin. On top of this, we know the Star Wars universe is continuing to expand. The release of Episode 9, The Mandalorian, and the final episodes of the Clone Wars series will bring new locations that players would enjoy seeing in a game, and these are just locations. There are still a number of popular characters that Star Wars fans want to see in a Battlefront game, like Ahsoka Tano and Asajj Ventress. The upshot here is that there is so much potential for new content to entice fans that EA would have no problems attracting players to a third installment. The question is, however, how would you make Battlefront 3 feel new and fresh, and not just an expansion or reskin of the last two games? There are certain aspects of the last two games that I would like to see incorporated into the new game. For example, the in-game battle point system from BF2 is much better at giving more players an opportunity to play as heroes, special units, and vehicles than the token pickups of BF1. The Trooper class system has its share of benefits, but also a few drawbacks. An updated Trooper class system, potentially with some subclasses, for instance a Grenadier and Medic for the Assault class, could add some variety. The key is adding some more variety as to how players choose to equip their troopers. I believe players like the Trooper class setup, but would like to see more flexibility built into star card options and abilities, and definitely more blasters. BF1 had such a great variety of blasters, and there is no reason not to give players more choices that includes unlockable modifications and perks. There is also the matter of game modes. Just like any multiplayer shooter, one should expect an assortment of game modes ranging from offline to online, to small maps with small teams to large maps with large teams. BF2 gets the balance almost right with several trooper-oriented small map modes, namely Blast, Strike, and Extraction, and a couple hero modes, Hero Showdown and Heroes vs. Villains. However, I would like to see at least one more large map mode. It does appear, however, that we will get one soon for BF2. As much as I like Galactic Assault, and it does incorporate a lot of aspects of the large game modes from BF1, a little more variety would be nice. Now here's an opinion that some will certainly disagree with. Ditch the Starfighter modes completely. I'm not suggesting that developers do not incorporate starfighters and aerial vehicles into the ground combat modes, or potentially a ship-to-ship mode. But the Starfighter modes are just not as popular, and rather than have the developers devote the time and effort into creating this mode that is somewhat dissimilar from the rest of the game, spin it off into its own full game. It's time we had a full Starfighter game again with a campaign, unlockable ships and upgrades, and multiplayer modes. I would also suggest abandoning the story mode. Rather than develop a new story mode, bring back an offline mode like Galactic Conquest that can incorporate a storyline, which is what so many players have wanted from the start. So why should EA and DICE get a shot at BF3? Star Wars fans have developed a love-hate relationship with these two companies, and more so with Electronic Arts than DICE over the last few years. And it's not all unjustified. Battlefront 1 was such a highly anticipated game, and DICE created a beautiful product that looked, sounded, and felt just like a Star Wars game should. but the content at launch was shallow, with only a handful of maps, and the entire game was dedicated to the original trilogy. Free content was rare, and while the DLC packs added some great new locations, maps, and game modes, it was hard not to see the 4 expansion packs and their price tags as anything but a cash grab for EA. Everyone thought EA had learned their lesson with the announcement of BF2, with the promise of free DLC seasons, more content at launch, and the inclusion of all movie eras in the game. EA delivered on those promises, but nearly tanked the game with the addition of loot crates in place of any real player progression system, and making fan favorites Luke and Vader so costly at launch it was nearly impossible to earn the in-game credits necessary to unlock them in any reasonable time. The blowback from the gaming community was so severe, EA went immediately into damage control by reducing the cost of Luke and Vader. Eventually the loot crates were removed, and finally a real progression system was added. The struggles with Battlefront are compounded by EA's issues with other recent titles. Anthem has been met with mixed reviews, as well as Battlefield 5 relative to the success of Battlefield 1. So back to the question. With so many strikes against them, why would I suggest that this same team make Battlefront 3? The fact is, while EA and DICE seem to be slow learners, they do learn. BF2 today is a completely different game than the one players purchased at launch. I'm not making a case that this should absolve them of their sins, but moving forward, I hope that EA has learned exactly what the wrath of Star Wars fans feels like and will remember it well. Secondly, EA and DICE have significant experience building games in a Star Wars setting. As I mentioned earlier, there are few games that bring Star Wars to life like this franchise, and they do an incredible job with the look and feel of the game. Yes, there are glitches and unbalancing issues from time to time, but the game is still incredibly fun to play almost a year and a half later. That experience and knowledge would all be lost by handing the Star Wars license to another developer and publisher. Which brings me to another point. Disney is a giant company, and they work with other big companies. It's unlikely that they would entrust a smaller, unproven publisher and developer with one of the most sought-after licenses in gaming. Nevertheless, EA has a few more hurdles to get over with fans, as well as Disney and Lucasfilm, before we can truly consider the potential of a BF3. For one, how the upcoming content for BF2 is received will be a major factor. If these new game modes receive favorable reviews and praise from gamers, it will go a long way for continuing the series. Secondly, the success of EA's next Star Wars title, Jedi Fallen Order, due out later this year, will either raise or lower the confidence in the publisher's ability to bring quality Star Wars titles to fans. In the end, I am willing to give EA and DICE another shot rather than losing the chance to play a third installment of Battlefront. Now, this is just my opinion. I know I am one voice of many, and there are plenty out there that would disagree with me. Nevertheless, I know there are others that feel the way I do, and if you want to see a Battlefront 3 title, then keep hitting up EA and let them know how you feel. So that's all I have for now. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll be back soon with a new video.